Hello. Hello. Hello, and welcome to the 80th episode of Scripture in a Year, hosted by Saints Peter and Paul Orthodox Church in the Albanian Archdiocese of the OCA. Today's reading will be from the fourth book of Kingdoms, or 2 Kings, chapters 5 through 8. Now Naaman, commander of the army of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord gave victory to Syria. The man was mighty in strength and valor, but a leper. And the Syrians, lightly armed, had gone out on raids and brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet of God in Samaria, for he would expel his leprosy from him." And she went in and told her master, saying, "This is what the girl from the land of Israel said." And the king of Syria said to Naaman, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 gold shekels, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I am sending Naaman my servant to you, so that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it came to pass, when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God, able to kill and make alive, to heal this man of his leprosy, that this man sends to me? You perceive and see that this man is using this as a pretext for a quarrel with me." When Elisha the man of God heard the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent notice to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let Naaman come to me, and he shall know there is a prophet in Israel." Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and bathe in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became furious and went away, saying, "Indeed, I told myself that Elisha would come out to greet me, that he would stand and call on the name of his God, and that he would put his hand upon the place and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Can I not bathe in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in rage. Then his servants approached and said to him, "If the prophet were to tell you to do something great, would you not complete it? But here the prophet said to you, 'Bathe and be clean.'" So Naaman went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to Elisha's instruction. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was cleansed. Then he, with all his aides, returned to Elisha, and came and stood before him. And he said, "Indeed, now I have come to know that in all the earth there is no God except the God of Israel. Now accept the gift of your servant." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." Again he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, "If not, then, please, let your servant be given 2 mule loads of red earth, for your servant will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord alone. And let the Lord be merciful with your servant. When my master goes there to the house of Rimmon to worship, he will rely on my hand, and I will worship in the house of Rimmon. In the worship of the house at Rimmon, may the Lord be merciful to your servant in this matter." Then Elisha said to Naaman, "Go in peace." He departed from him but a short distance. Then Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, said, "Behold, my master spared this Syrian Naaman, yet from his hand he received nothing of what he brought. But as the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something of his." So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he turned from the chariot to meet him. And Gehazi said, "Peace, my master sent me, saying, 'Indeed, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets came to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments.'" Then Naaman said, "Take 2 talents of silver." So Gehazi took 2 talents of silver in his 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to 2 of his servants. They left and carried them on ahead of him. As they entered into the darkness, he took them from their hands and stored them in the house. Then he dismissed the men. Now he went in and stood before his master. And Elisha said to him, "From where have you come, Gehazi?" And he said, "Your servant did not go anywhere." And Elisha said to him, "Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? And now you receive the silver and the garments, and it shall happen that you shall receive from him gardens and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and men servants and handmaidens. And the leprosy of Naaman shall also cling to you and your seed forever." Thus he went out from his presence leprous like snow. Then the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "See now, the strip of land where we dwell with you is too narrow for us. Please let us go to the river Jordan, and let every man take a log and build there a dwelling place." So he answered, "Go." And one of them humbly requested, "Come with your servants." And he replied, "I will go." Then he went with them, and they came to the river Jordan and began to cut trees. But as one man was cutting a log, the iron axe head fell into the water. He cried out and said, "Alas, master, it was borrowed." So the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place. So he broke off a stick of wood and threw it in the water at the same place. And the iron axe head rose to the surface. Then Elisha said, "Raise it up to yourself." So he reached down into the water and lifted it out. Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, "I shall encamp in this specific place." Then Elisha sent word to the king of Israel, saying, "Be careful not to pass this place, for the Syrians are hidden there." In response, the king of Israel sent someone to this place, which Elisha warned. In response, the king of Israel sent someone to this place, which Elisha warned about, and thereby kept careful watch over the Syrians on more than 2 occasions. As a result, the king of Syria became troubled as to what was happening. He called upon his officers and said to them, "Will you not tell me who gives advance warning of our movements to the king of Israel?" And one of his officers said, "No one, O Lord my king. It is Elisha the prophet in Israel that tells the words you speak in your bedroom to the king of Israel." So he said, "Go, see where this man is, and I will send and kidnap him." They sent word to him, saying, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So he sent horses and chariots and a great army that arrived at night to surround the city. When Elisha's servant arose early and went out, the army was there, surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, "O master, what shall we do?" So he answered, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are greater in number than those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, open the eyes of the servant and let him see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he was now able to see. And he beheld the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Then the Syrians marched towards him. And Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike these people with blindness." And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. So Elisha said to them, "This is not the city, nor is this the way to it. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man you seek." But he led them away to Samaria. So it came to be, when they arrived in Samaria, Elisha said, "Lord, open their eyes and let them see." Thus the Lord completely restored their ability to see, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "O father, shall I not strike to kill them?" But he answered, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you took captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink and return to their lord." Then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he dismissed them, and they departed to their lord. So lightly armed raiding parties of Syrians no longer came into the land of Israel. And it came to pass that after this, the son of Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all the troops of his army and went up and besieged Samaria. There was a great famine in Samaria. Indeed, they besieged it even to the point where the value placed on the head of a donkey was 50 shekels of silver, and 2 quarts of dove droppings cost 5 shekels of silver. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Save me, my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord does not save you from the threshing floor or from the winepress, how can I save you?" The king said to her, "What is troubling you?" And she answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give us your son so that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I told her, 'Give me your son so we may eat him.' But she hid her son." Now when the king heard the woman's words, he tore his clothes, and as he passed by on the wall, the people saw that underneath his clothes he wore sackcloth on his body. And he said, God do so to me and more also, if the head of Elisha remains on him today." Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him, when the king sent a man ahead of him. But before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, "Do you see that this son of a murderer was sent to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and keep him on the outside of the door. Is that not sound of his master's feet behind him?" While yet talking with them, behold, the messenger came down towards him. And the king said, "Listen, this evil is of the Lord, so why should I remain patient in the Lord?" Then Elisha said, "Hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, about this time tomorrow at the gate of Samaria, a measure of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and for a shekel 2 measures of barley." So the officer on whose hand the king relied retorted to Elisha and said, "Look, even if the Lord in heaven will make a downpour of rain, this event shall not happen." And Elisha said, "Behold, you shall see this with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it." Now at the entrance of the gate there were 4 leprous men, and one of them said to his neighbor, "Why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, 'Let us go into the city,' and there is famine in the city, we will die there. And if we sit here in this place, then we will die. Now therefore, come, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians. If they keep us alive, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall die." So they rose in the darkness to head to the army camp of the Syrians. They entered the outskirts of the army camp, and no one was there. For the Lord had caused the army of Syria to hear the noise of chariots, and the noise of horses, and the noises of a very great army. For the Lord made the army of Syria say to one another, "Look, the king of Israel hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to attack us." So they arose in the darkness and quietly fled for their lives, leaving their tents, their horses, and their donkeys at the campsite. And when these lepers came to the outskirts of the camp, they went into one tent and ate and drank and carried away from it silver and gold and clothing. Then they left and came back to enter another tent, to take from there and to hide the spoils. And one said to the others, "This is not right. This day is a day of good news, and if we remain silent and wait until the light of morning, we will find wickedness in the city. Now come here, let us enter the city and deliver this good news to the house of the king." So they went and cried out with a loud voice toward the gate of the city, and proclaimed to them, saying, "We entered the army camp of Syria, and behold, no one was there, not a man or a human voice. The only things there were the tied up horses and donkeys and their tents, which they left intact." Then the gatekeepers shouted the news, and it was reported to the house of the king inside. So the king arose in the night and said to his servants, "Now I will inform you as to what the Syrians are doing. They know we are hungry. Therefore they went out of the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, 'When they come out of the city, we shall catch them alive and capture the city.' Then one of his servants answered and said, 'Indeed, let them now take 5 of the remaining horses of all that remain of the multitude of Israel, and send them there to see.' Therefore they saddled the 2 horses, and the king of Israel sent them after the king of Syria, saying, 'Go and see.' And they went down after them, even to the Jordan. Indeed, all along the way the road was full of garments and vessels, which the Syrians themselves cast away in the panic. So the messengers returned and brought word to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the army camp of Syria, and a measure of fine flour sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, true to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the officer, the one on whose hand the king relied, to have charge of the gate. But the people trampled him in the gate, and he died, as the man of God said, who spoke when the king came down to him. So it happened just as Elisha has said to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and a measure of fine flour for a shekel, shall be sold tomorrow, about this time, in the gate of Samaria." Then the officer had answered Elisha with this retort, "Look, even if the Lord in heaven should make a downpour of rain, this sort of thing would never happen." Then Elisha had answered, "In fact, you shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it." So it was in this way, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, "Arise and go, you and your household, and stay wherever you can, for the Lord called for a famine on the land." It will come upon the land for 7 years. So the woman arose, and both she and her house did according to the saying of Elisha. They sojourned in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, the woman returned from the land of the Philistines and went to make an appeal to the king for her house and her land. Now the king spoke to Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, saying, "Tell me all the significant deeds Elisha has accomplished." And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how Elisha restored her dead son to life, behold, the woman, whose son Elisha had restored to life, came crying to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, "My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life." So the king asked the woman, and she related this fully to him. Then the king told a certain eunuch, saying, "Restore all that was hers, and all the proceeds of the field from the day she left the land until now." Then Elisha went to Damascus at a time when the son of Hadad, the king of Syria, was sick. And they brought word to him, saying, "The man of God is here." And the king said to Hazael, "Take in your hand a present, and go meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord by him, asking, 'Shall I recover from this disease?'" So Hazael went to meet him. In his hand he took a present, plus all the good things of Damascus, 40 camel loads. And he came and stood before him and said, "Your son, the king of Syria, the son of Hadad, sent me to ask you whether he would recover from this disease." So Elisha said to him, "Go tell him, you shall live. However, the Lord made known to me that he will die by being put to death." The man of God wept and sat there until he was ashamed. Then he stood up in the presence of Hazael. At this, Hazael said, "Why does my lord weep?" He answered, "Because I know the evil you will do to the sons of Israel. You will utterly destroy their strongholds with fire, and you will kill their young men with the sword. You will dash their children and rip open their pregnant women." Then Hazael said, "What is your servant that I should do such a thing, a dead dog?" Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you will become king over Syria." Then he departed from Elisha and came to his lord, who said to him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he answered, "He told me you will live." But on the next day, Hazael took a thick cloth and dipped it in water and spread it over the face of the king, the son of Hadad, and he died. Hazael reigned in his place. Now in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, Joram, the king of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, began to reign. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Yet the Lord would not destroy Judah for the sake of his servant David, as he promised to give a lamp to him and to his sons forever. In his days, Edom revolted against Judah's authority and made a king over themselves. So Joram went to Seir with all his chariots, and it came to be, after he raised his troops, he struck Edom and the captains of the chariots who had encircled him. The people fled to their tents. Even so, Edom revolted from being subordinate to the authority of Judah to this day. At the same time, Libnah revolted as well. Behold, the rest of the acts of Joram, and everything he did, are these not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So Joram rested with his fathers, and was buried with his father in the city of David his father. Then Ahaziah his son reigned in his place. In the 12th year of Joram the son of Ahab, the king of Israel, Ahaziah the son of Jehoram began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. And he walked in the way of the house of Ahab, and did evil in the sights of the Lord, like the house of Ahab. Now he went with Joram the son of Ahab to war against Hazael, king of Syria, at Ramoth Gilead. And the Syrians wounded Joram. Then King Joram went back to Jezreel to recover from the wounds the Syrians inflicted on him at Ramah, where he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel, because he was sick. Here ends the reading for today.